Section 4 of A Visit to the Holy Land. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Chapter 2 of A Visit to the Holy Land, Egypt and Italy, Part 2, by Ida L. Pfeiffer. The beautiful mosques, with their graceful minarets, the palaces and harems, kiosks and great barracks, the gardens, shrubberies, and cypress woods, the gaily painted houses, among which single cypresses often rear their slender heads, these, together with the immense forest of masts, combine to form an indescribably striking spectacle. When the bustle of life began, on the shore and on the sea, my eyes scarcely sufficed to take in all I saw. The Golden Horn became gradually covered, as far as the eye could reach, with countless multitude of caiques. The restless turmoil of life on shore, the passing to and fro of men of all nations and colors, from the pale inhabitant of Europe to the blackest Ethiopian, the combination of varied and characteristic costumes, this and much more which I cannot describe, held me spellbound to the deck. The hours flew past like minutes, and even the time of debarkation came much too early for me, although I had stood on deck and gazed from 3 o'clock until 8. I found myself richly repaid for all the toils of my journey, and rejoiced in the sight of these wonderful Eastern pictures. I could only wish I were a poet, that I might fitly portray the magnificent gorgeousness of the sight. To land at Topona, and to be immediately surrounded by hired servants and hammaks (porters), is the fate of every traveller. The stranger is no longer master either of his will or his luggage. One man praises this inn, the other that. The porters hustle and beat each other for your effects, so that the custom-house officers frequently come forward with their sticks to restore order. The boxes are then searched, a ceremony which can, however, be considerably accelerated by a fee of from 10 to 20 kreutzers. It is very advisable to fix on an hotel before leaving the boat. There are always passengers on board who are resident at Constantinople, or at least know the town well, and who are polite enough to give advice on the subject to strangers. By this means you rid yourself at once of the greedy servants, and need only tell a porter the name of your inn. The inns for the Franks, a term used in the East to designate all Europeans, are in Pera. I stayed at the hotel of Madame Balbiani, a widow lady, in whose house the guests are made comfortable in every respect. Clean rooms, with a beautiful view towards the sea, healthy, well-selected and palatable fare, and good prompt attendance are advantages which every one values, and all these are found at Madame Balbiani's, besides constant readiness to oblige on the part of the hostess and her family. The good lady took quite a warm interest in me, and I can say without hesitation that had not my good fortune led me under her roof, I should have been badly off. I had several letters of introduction, but not being fortunate enough to travel in great pomp or with a great name, my countrymen did not consider it worth while to trouble themselves about me. I am ashamed for their sakes to be obliged to make this confession, but as I have resolved to narrate circumstantially not only all I saw, but all that happened to me on this journey, I must note down this circumstance with the rest. I felt the more deeply the kindness of these strangers, who, without recommendation or the tie of country, took so hearty an interest in the well-being of a lonely woman. I am truly rejoiced when an opportunity occurs of expressing my sincere gratitude for the agreeable hours I spent among them. The distance from Vienna to Constantinople is about 1,000 sea miles. I arrived at Constantinople on a Tuesday, and immediately inquired what was worth seeing. I was advised to go and see the dancing dervishes, as this was the day on which they held their religious exercises in Pera. As I reached the mosque an hour too soon, I betook myself in the meantime to the adjoining gardens, which is set apart as the place of meeting of the Turkish women. Here several hundred ladies reclined on the grass in varied groups, surrounded by their children and their nurses, the latter of whom are all negresses. Many of these Turkish women were smoking pipes of tobacco with an appearance of extreme enjoyment, and drinking small cups of coffee without milk. 2 or 3 friends often made use of the same pipe, which was passed round from mouth to mouth. These ladies seemed also to be partial to dainties. Most of them were well provided with raisins, figs, sugared nuts, cakes, etc., and ate as much as the little ones. They seemed to treat their slaves very kindly. The black servants sat among their mistresses, and munched away bravely. The slaves are well dressed, and could scarcely be distinguished from their owners, were it not for their sable hue. During my whole journey I remarked with pleasure that the lot of a slave in the house of a Mussulman is not nearly so hard as we believe. The Turkish women are no great admirers of animated conversations. Still, there was more talking in their societies than the assemblies of the men, who sit silent and half asleep in the coffee houses, languidly listening to the narrations of a story-teller. The ladies' garden resembles a churchyard. Funeral monuments peer forth at intervals between the cypresses, beneath which the visitors sit talking and joking cheerfully. Every now and then one would suddenly start up, spread a carpet beside her companions, and kneel down to perform her devotions. As no one of the male sex was allowed to be present, all were unveiled. I noticed many pretty faces among them, but not a single instance of rare or striking beauty. Fancy large brilliant eyes, pale cheeks, broad faces, and an occasional tendency to corpulence, and you have the lady's portrait. Smallpox must still be rather prevalent in these parts, for I saw marks of it on many faces. The Turkish lady's costume is not very tasteful. When they go abroad, they are completely swathed in an upper garment, generally made of dark merino. In the harem, or in any place where men are not admitted, they doff this garment, and also the white cloth in which they wrapped their heads and faces. Their costume consists, properly speaking, of very wide trousers drawn together below the ankle, a petticoat with large wide sleeves, and a broad sash round the waist. Over this sash some wear a kaftan, others only a spencer, generally of silk. On their feet they wear delicate boots, and over these slippers of yellow morocco. On their heads a small fez cap, from beneath which their hair falls on their shoulders in a number of thin plaits. Those Turks, male and female, who are descended from Mahomet, have either a green kaftan or a green turban. This color is here held so sacred that scarcely any one may wear it. I would even advise the Franks to avoid green in their dresses, as they may expose themselves to annoyance by using it. After I had more than an hour's leisure to notice all these circumstances, a noise suddenly arose in the courtyard, which produced a stir among the women. I considered from these appearances that it was time to go to the temple, and hastened to join my party. A great crowd was waiting in the courtyard, for the Sultan was expected. I was glad to have the good fortune to behold him on the very day of my arrival. As a stranger, I was allowed without opposition a place in the front ranks, a trait of good breeding on the part of the Turks, which many a Frank would do well to imitate. In a Turk, moreover, this politeness is doubly praiseworthy, from the fact that he looks upon my poor sex with great disrespect. Indeed, according to his creed, we have not even a soul. I had only stood a few moments when the Sultan appeared on horseback, surrounded by his train. He alone rode into the courtyard, the others all dismounted at the gate, and entered on foot. The horse on which the Sultan rode was of rare beauty, and, as they told me, of the true Arabian breed. The saddle-cloth was richly embroidered with gold, and the stirrups, of the same precious metal, were in the form of shoes, covered with the finest chased work. The Sultan is a slender, slim-looking youth of 19 years of age, and looks pale, languid, and blasé. His features are agreeable, and his eyes fine. If he had not abandoned himself at so early an age to all the pleasures of the senses, he would no doubt have grown up a stalwart man. He wore a long cape of dark blue cloth, and a high fez cap, with a heron's plume and a diamond clasp decking his head. The greeting of the people, and the Sultan's mode of acknowledging it, is exactly as at Vienna, except that here the people at intervals raise a low cry of welcome. As soon as the Sultan had